Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Atmosphere Maps Online. My name is Georgia, and it is my pleasure to be your host today for what we hope will be an informative and educational session. Google's mission is to organise the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And in recent years, we've come a long way in extending this notion to include location-based and geospatial data as well. Today, we're turning our attention to the utilities sector. The session today will run for around 30 minutes and will include a presentation followed by a product demonstration. Throughout the course of the presentation, we invite you to submit any questions that you might have via the Google form that you will see to the right-hand side of your browser. You might also like to take a moment now to set your video to full screen by pressing on the full screen icon in the bottom right-hand side. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our first speaker. Ed Knott is one of our account executives, and he will be speaking to you in some detail about maps for business and utilities. So Ed, over to you.
Thanks, Georgia, and hi everyone. In today's presentation, we're going to talk about Google's Geospatial Technologies, that's Google Maps and Earth, and how they can be leveraged in the utilities industry to increase visibility of your data and assets, and in doing so, drive productivity and operational efficiencies. Let me just go to my slides here. So in terms of an agenda, we're actually going to flick through a couple of quick trends that we see in the consumer market. We're going to do a quick overview of the platform. We're going to tell you why we think that's relevant in the utility sector, and we're going to include in that some customer case studies. So firstly, we're going to talk about a couple of consumer-based trends that are changing our thinking in the enterprise. So first we'll talk about the proliferation of Google Maps. In the consumer space, Google Maps has a profound influence on the way we conduct our lives. And the numbers are absolutely astonishing in terms of people using it on both their mobile and their desktops. We use now the tool to navigate from A to B, and we factor in the traffic on our route. We utilize maps within our social applications to find out where friends are and push them relevant information about their location. We can use it to find the closest products and services, and we use Street View to visualize the places before we visit them. Now at Google Enterprise, we're asking our customers to imagine, how could you transform your workplace by using some of these same tools? Now in terms of the numbers that I mentioned previously, we've actually got 1 billion active monthly users using both the Maps and the Earth capability. We have 200 million monthly active mobile users. We actually have 10 million people using this, plus in navigation that's growing quite considerably. And also we have 12+ billion miles being driven each year, and that's both navigation and assets that are actually being tracked on the maps. Now when we actually implement software, there's a major focus on usability. If the consumer doesn't find, or the person in your organization doesn't find that it's intuitive tool, it's very difficult to get the right sort of adoption rate. And with Google Maps, as we've just seen in terms of some of the numbers, there's enormous consumer adoption, and that means geo-literacy for all. Everybody knows how to view the map, to pan and zoom, to view data on that map. And we think that's a major consideration when it comes down to the cost of training people to leverage the tool, as well as the adoption rate. So the second trend relates to the dramatic shift in the adoption of new technologies within the consumer space compared to the enterprise. It used to be that we would come to work to get hands on the best technologies, but in fact most of us didn't have a computer at home for many years. But this trend has completely shifted, and in many cases we now have better technologies at home and on our mobiles, and we often have to leave that at the door before we come into the office. At Google Enterprise, we live by the mantra, work the way you live. We believe you can make dramatic changes in the organization through the use of consumer-based technologies. So how do you do that? So before we go into the utility case studies, I just wanted to quickly give you an overview of the platform. So all of the user cases that we're going to discuss in just a moment are all predicated on the ability to leverage a central store to both visualize and publish your data. So in the enterprise today, we have many different data stores. We've got lots of different applications, that you need to maintain in order to run your business. We've got CAD systems, we've got GIS systems, outage management, network management, customer data, so on and so forth. And so really, through the use of Google Maps platform, and that could be Google Maps Engine, or it could be Earth Enterprise, you can actually centrally manage and visualize and publish that data. So it all starts with a Google Map. And that could be a Maps API, the 2D client. That could be Earth Pro, which is a 3D client. It could include Street View or oblique imagery. On top of that, we then might want to include some third-party data, which might be municipal data. It could be aerial or satellite imagery. You might want to then include your data, which could be, transmission infrastructure data. It could be pipeline networks, pole locations, or customer data. You may have some imagery, like pipeline corridors or private aerial imagery that you've collected, or even a custom photo collect of a substation, for example. And on top of that, you want to be able to view your assets. And this is your field assets, your remote workers, your vehicles, equipment, and so on and so forth. And that's the platform together, all leveraged through open standard APIs. And that could be a Google-based application that you can leverage, like Coordinate, or it could be an application that you've built yourself. And really, this is the platform becomes the building blocks to help you manage and visualize your data. Now, in terms of the use cases, many things we could have gone into, but just sort of tried to keep it to a small number given the timing that we have today. So we're going to talk about customer engagement, maintenance and repairs, planning and management, and regulatory compliance. So the first one we're going to talk about is customer engagement. Now, it can be incredibly expensive and costly to actually engage with your customers, especially when you have problems, outages maybe, you have to field multiple calls, and you've got complaints associated with that. Now, often you have all the data available to be able to, present this to the customer. And so, I think our message is set that data free. Build yourself a platform where you can leverage the information where it's most needed. And so that could be using the Maps API on your website to be able to present information around outages and resolution times, especially important around resolution times. It could be that you need to have some additional information that you can only surface internally to your customer service teams. So if a customer does need to call you and they do have to get through to gather some information, your customer service teams have the most up-to-date information possible. And the key thing here, and linking back to the piece that we were talking about around consumers, the tool must be intuitive. It's got to be something that people can easily find the information they want, and that's both an external factor as well as internally. And then lastly, there's a bit of a trend as well around crowdsourcing data and using the public to assist in the collecting of information so that you can validate a lot of your suspicions. It could be that you have customers using a mobile app to take a photo of a light pole that's out and they geolocate their position. It could be that they also geolocate a water main outage or leak or whatever it may be. And so those things now are providing a very cost-effective way to be able to validate the information that you suspect and actually use the public to be able to gather very quick and relevant information. And again, the big focus here is about reducing operational expenditure. Now, in terms of case studies, Florida Power and Light is a very good example of somebody that's doing this very well. Obviously, they're a major power provider in Florida. They've got about 4.5 million customers, and they actually leverage our platform to visualize over 1 million data points that relate to property lines and trucks and equipment, and even environmental factors like eagle nests and conservation areas and that type of thing. They leverage the platform to engage with their consumers and provide information on updates and resolution times. And it's actually provided a huge cost saving to the organization, both in terms of the way that they engage and the costs associated with engaging with customers, but also in the way and the time it takes to resolve issues. So the second one we're going to talk about today is maintenance and repairs. And I guess I'll really sort of push a question straight out there. I mean, do you have a good view of your assets in the field and allocated jobs based on location? Again, what we're sort of suggesting is you can use the platform to collect this information and visualize that information in a central store. So I guess, do you have access to those jobs? Do you understand where those jobs are related to your workers? Do you understand what skills those people have? And if you need more information when a worker actually gets to that job, do they have the ability to collaborate with somebody either else in the field or somebody back at headquarters? So we actually have a tool called Coordinate that actually provides you with the ability to push jobs based on the field worker's location, and then also collaborate either via Hangout or by instant message or by photos or pushing information in terms of documents actually to that field worker. And Ergon Energy is a really good example of somebody that's doing this incredibly well. So Ergon actually leverage a number of Google Geospatial Technologies. They use a platform to store much of their geospatial data, and they use Earth Pro to visualize a lot of that data. And what they've actually done is, in terms of their actual network, rather than having to walk the line and actually validate the details of, let's say, vegetation around that particular electricity network, they've actually fly planes over that and actually collect that personal imagery and use it within the platform. And that has helped them quite dramatically to assess the growth of vegetation and then actually drive their workers to jobs where they know it's more important. And there's been a huge saving, as you can see on your screen. They're actually expecting to save up to 60 million over the next 5 years. The third one we're going to talk about is planning and management. So again, it's all about utilizing the same platform to pull a lot of these individual data sets around planning and management together. Often we've sort of said before, this data resides in multiple data stores. It's often siloed, so you might have demographic information. It may even be unstructured. You might have population growth in one silo, usage in another, network data or planning data in another silo. What we're suggesting is you bring all this information together. And I guess the vegetation management example that we just talked about, Ergon, is a very good example of them being able to pull both network-related data together with imagery to make the right decisions for their business. And it's all about proactively managing your risk and your costs. So another organisation that is a good example of what we were just talking about is GIDF. They're one of the largest natural gas suppliers in France. They actually have a network that's nearly 200,000 kilometres long. And they use the Google platform to essentially store 18 million data points about their pipeline, which they implemented actually, by the way, in less than 6 months. They now actually have over 1,000 employees every day utilising the platform to access customer locations, geographic coordinates. They're using Street View on a regular basis. They're looking at municipality information, and it's all through that very familiar Google Maps interface. They also have natural gas technicians using the 3D capabilities within Earth Pro to actually plan installations and service work before they go out in the field. It's really making a very big change in their business. And lastly, we're going to talk about regulatory compliance. So requirements around compliance, as we know, is just going to increase over time. We have to manage multiple government agencies at both a state and a federal level. And again, there's a way to be able to manage all this information that comes in and actually publish this information as well to the appropriate bodies in a central store. So centrally store and manage your compliance data. So we could be talking about heritage sites, we could be talking about biodiversity of a particular area, it could be emissions or pollution. The key thing is you need the right information in the hands of the right people, and it needs to be where they are actually working. So it could be in the office, it could be work they're doing prior to being in the field, but it also could be people installing new pipelines or new poles, and they actually need that information directly in the field. So Sutton and East Surrey Water, again another big customer of ours, water utility in the UK. They have around 700,000 customers, and they actually utilise Google Coordinate, the product that I mentioned earlier. Prior to actually using Coordinate, they actually had a very highly paper-driven process to actually maintain their network. And since they've actually implemented Google Coordinate, the platform has dramatically changed the way that they work. Since go live, they've actually realised a 500% return on investment. They've had a 17% increase in operational efficiency, and this is especially around the smart meters fitting teams that have been out in the field. And they've also reduced their fixed penalties by 58%. And that's not to mention the dramatic change that they've had in terms of customer service. So those are the 4 use cases. I hope you've enjoyed that. It was only a snippet of the information that we can provide, and we hope we can talk to you more. But thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass you back to Georgia.
Thanks very much for that, Ed. We've had a question come in from our live viewers today. One person asks, what trends are you seeing for how the utility sector is making use of Google's geospatial technologies?
Okay, thanks, Georgia. And that's a great question. I mean, I've sort of talked a little bit about that today. When we've seen that a lot of people have been using the Maps API capability on their websites, and there's a number of organisations in both the energy sector and water sort of sector leveraging that in Australia. And then we've also got people leveraging Earth, but often they're actually pushing either KML or shapefiles onto their laptop. And really what we're seeing is the major trend towards centralization. So people know they've got separate data stores. They want to be able to pull this all into a central store and actually have contextual information. And so the stuff that we were just talking about there is in pulling a number of these different data sets into the central store is really the trend that we're seeing. But it's not just in terms of people using things like Earth Enterprise behind the firewall. It's very much now about looking at the cloud as well. And so with lots of imagery that people might need to process, we're now starting to see a bit of a hybrid between using Earth Enterprise and actually starting to use some of the capabilities in the cloud.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, Ed. So that brings us to the second part of today's session. We're going to move now to the product demonstration. Joining us today is Alvaro. He's a GIS specialist and our sales engineer in Sydney. Alvaro, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Georgia. In this demonstration, we'll be looking at how utility companies can leverage off the platform and effectively manage their data, getting it out to different types of users within the business, internally or externally. Utility companies have a big challenge in managing this data that has a big spatial component associated to it. These data sets are going to be critical in effectively servicing the customers and their needs. In this demonstration, we'll cover three key areas. First off is going to be managing those data sets and effectively sharing them with different types of users. Then we're going to be looking at optimizing the field force and making sure that they service the customer needs effectively. And then finally, we can build custom applications that help utility companies better engage with their users, their contractors, or other people trying to access data from them. Just share my screen. All right. So we can start off by seeing what operation team or an emergency response team might see. In this example, we have Wellington City Water utility data presented in Google Earth Pro. By having all spatial data centrally managed, it allows for effective sharing and collaboration between organizations in situations that require access to multiple sources of information. In this case, the operations team have access to the water network data. Going back to something that Ed mentioned and the layering effect, this is what it looks like. You have a certain set of data sets that are available here, which represent the network data sets, and then you have a shared resource like imagery, high-resolution imagery that gives a better understanding of where the network is in relation to real-world features. We can think of operations managers or emergency crews looking at these data sets to better make decisions when required. Apart from that, we can think of adding new data sets that might be available that have been published by external sources that help remediate any emergency situations. In this case, we've got tsunami evacuation zones and where they are in relation to the existing network elements. Apart from that, we can have other data sets displayed on the map. We can think of a customer service representative taking in calls from different customers. When the customers place a call, the customer representative takes on their service request and is then presented on the map. This visualization of the different events that are recorded by the customer service representatives are immediately visible to, let's say, the operations team or the emergency response team. In this case, a faulty valve has been reported and needs some work. Another example could be a disruption of service where there is a water overflow. So in this first example, what we've seen is sharing data and having a common platform to access all those different data sets. If we look at a second application where we might have other sources of information and that might be used by the dispatch team to get the field workers out to do the jobs, this is what they might be seeing. So here we've got a set of jobs represented by these points, and then the network elements that are associated to the jobs that the field crew are going to be doing. We can also see the jobs that have been called in by the customer service representative. Here we've got that faulty valve problem, and then down here we've got the emergency. So the dispatcher has a quick overview of what jobs are, where the field crew are, where the jobs are in relation to where the field crew are, and can make a decision as to who to best assign the job to. In this case, this job that's been created here, the scheduled maintenance, can be moved around and assigned to a field worker. So we can say the new job is in this location, save that, and assign it to the field worker. In this way, the jobs are assigned and the field crew can go to the field and do the work. Finally, we can see an application that is integrating a different set of data and functionality. In this case, we've got the same network data sets, but we've got a familiar map that has a bit of terrain information. This site design estimation tool allows a field worker to quickly go to a site before actually visiting or doing the job. In this case, if the field worker is going to visit a site, he goes and uses the map in the same way that he's accustomed to using a Google map. He can use other things like the satellite imagery that might be available and start to see where the job might be and what might be surrounding the job. Apart from that, he's got access to the network data. He can query a network element and the information associated to that network element. This information might be coming from an asset management system, and it tells him immediately the type of materials that are required or might be required to do the job. Associated to that could be a work order or any previous history associated to the work. The other interesting functionality available with this map is being able to visit the site without actually going, to see what might be required when going and doing the job. If there's any clearing or any specific things that need to be taken into consideration before being on site. Finally, if there's some work to be done and some new pipeline or some new infrastructure elements need to be added to the network, they can be done and quickly designed through this tool. So if we want to lay out a bit of pipe, the site design estimation tool gives us a quick overview of how much it's going to cost, or potentially the materials are going to cost to do that job. You can add other elements associated to it, and it keeps calculating the new costs based on values that might be existing in other systems like the asset management system. So to finish off, in this quick demonstration, we've shown you how utility companies can leverage off the Google Maps platform to make better decisions, optimize people and assets, and engage your users. In the first example, we saw how sharing data through a common platform is very effective and can help different teams. Then we looked at optimizing people and assets through Google Maps Coordinate. The dispatcher has an immediate view of the jobs that are coming through and can immediately make decisions on who is the best person to go and do that job. And then finally, a custom application that is integrating different sources of data through the mapping interface and allowing the fieldwork crew or contractors visit the site and do a bit of work before actually going out and doing the job. Back to you, Jordan.
Thanks, Alvaro. That was a great demonstration. We've had some questions come in from the audience for you, Alvaro. One viewer has asked, can Google do a deployment for me? And what resources are available to help me get started? Sorry, Alvaro, you're going to have to unmute your microphone there so we can hear you.
Sorry. There are plenty of resources that are available online for you to start looking at. The first place I would go to look at is the website and look at the different samples and bits of code that are available. Then there's also 24/7 support that's available to the Maps for Business customers. And finally, our extensive partner network that can help out and try and define what is going to be required for the application that you want to build.
Excellent. Alvaro, in the demo you also showed us the site design estimation tool. Is this tool linked to any back-end systems?
Yeah. In this case, the tool is not really linked to any back-end systems, but you can definitely create tools that are linked to other systems, and then have a tool similar to this site design tool be the presentation framework for all of that information. So if we think of what was shown in the design tool, there was a bit of calculation going on in terms of the amount of pipe I was laying. So if there is some pipe information that's available through an asset management system, the site design tool or the application that's built can actually automatically calculate that.
Fantastic. So one final question, Alvaro. Can data be visualized in real time?
Yes, data can be coming in from different sources in real time if necessary. Google has, so the Google Maps coordinate, for example, reports data back to the dispatcher and shows the field worker as they're moving. Or there are other applications that, that might be feeding off real-time data that can be presented onto the map.
Great, thanks very much for joining us today, Alvaro.
No worries.
So that brings today's session to a close. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. For all of those who asked questions that we were unable to get to during the webinar, we will be sure to answer these questions for you offline. Please take a moment before you leave us today to complete the feedback survey that you can access via the green button at the top of your browser window. Lastly, we hope that you can join us for our next Hangouts on air. We'll be running these sessions over the coming weeks. For details, please keep an eye out for further information and emails from us here at Google, or you can follow the Google Enterprise page on Google+ for session times. Thanks very much for joining us and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.